All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We got an interesting topic. I think one that unfortunately isn't discussed as much as it should be in financial services. And this is an incredibly powerful tool. We're going to talk about solo 401ks. And so a lot of us are familiar with the 401k product, but when we think about the self-directed world, we think about investing in alternative assets. Typically, we're thinking in terms of investing with an IRA. And so today we're going to talk about an alternative to the IRA concept, and that's the solo 401k. And again, as we've marketed this, this is an incredibly powerful tool and one that, if you qualify, can help you grow wealth even more quickly, perhaps, than the IRA product can. And so at American IRA, we are one of the few fully integrated self-directed IRA firms. So what that means is we have the same ownership group for American IRA as we do for the parent trust company, New Vision Trust. And so as clients, that's going to give you a few advantages. First and foremost, the fees are going to be lower. We don't have to worry about third-party trust companies and the fees that they need to get to be able to custody our assets. So that means we can pass along the cost savings to you, which is hugely beneficial. And then what is kind of a nuanced type of advantage, but I believe just as important, is the fact that because we're fully integrated, because we have such clear and consistent dialogue with our fellow employees on the trust company level, we're able to get the most up-to-date and accurate information in terms of trends in the industry, in terms of compliance elements and things like that. So we're really proud of the company that we're building at American IRA. And fortunately for us, our clients are really happy with the service as well. So regardless of the online platform that you utilize, you're going to find that we're very highly rated at American IRA. And that says a lot because certainly as we go online, unfortunately, usually what you hear are customers that are unhappy with different products and services. I had a little bit of an issue on one of my investment properties where a mortgage company was not actually paying the escrowed amounts that they were taking for taxes and insurance. And so as I was trying to find the right resources, I happened to come across their reviews, their online reviews, and I think they had a 0.8 star rating on Google reviews. So obviously, unfortunately, in this case, there were thousands of individuals that had taken time out of their busy schedule to kind of share their not so positive experience with that firm. And then conversely, at American IRA, we're fortunate to have close to a 5, like a perfect rating, if you will, on the Google reviews. So we're very, very, very fortunate for that. And so what's critical to understand today about the solo 401k concept is all of the strategies that you may be familiar with in terms of investing a self-directed IRA, we can also utilize with a self-directed solo 401k. So all of the asset classes are available, whether it's real estate, whether it's private equity, precious metals, cryptocurrencies, pretty much anything you can think of that's not collectibles or life insurance policies. And then for those of you that are real estate investors and you're looking at possible strategies, all of these strategies can be utilized as well. So from rentals, fix and flips, turning around contracts via assignment, joint venturing on deals, so basically just partnering, and then also hard money or private lending is something that you can do with your solo 401k. So when I think about acquisition strategies for clients, whether it's on the private equity side, whether it's on the real estate side, to me, there are kind of 3 fundamental concepts that we could potentially utilize when purchasing an asset. Again, with either a self-directed IRA or a self-directed solo 401k. So option number 1 is the most typical, where the retirement account is going to be the sole owner of the asset, and it's simply paying cash for the asset. So if it's a rental property for $200,000, the retirement account is paying cash of $200,000. It's not getting a mortgage. Option number 2 is where the retirement account either does not have all the cash or doesn't want to utilize all of its cash to be the sole owner of that $200,000 rental property. So the retirement account can joint venture. It can partner with other investors to make that deal work. So It could be with another retirement account. It could be with an individual. It could be with a company. And it can own essentially a portion of the asset. It could own 10%, 20%, 80%, whatever the partnership arrangement might look like. And then option three is where the retirement account can actually borrow money to make an investment. Now, typically it will need to be an income producing investment. So something like a rental property is a potential option there. So the retirement account, again, doesn't have all of the cash to buy that $200,000 rental property. It could borrow via a very specific loan called a non-recourse loan. And we'll talk a little bit about how the non-recourse loan interacts with a solo 401k today. But the situation is that a solo 401k is actually the ideal vehicle to actually use leverage to borrow money versus their IRA counterparts. So now we're just going to start with kind of the baseline, the basic information with these solo 401ks. And so fundamentally, the solo 401k is for the client that is self-employed and does not have full-time employees. And the exceptions for that, no third-party full-time employment, is if the spouse actually works in the business. The spouse could be a full-time employee as well, or if there's what's considered a highly compensated employee. And the IRS defines out specifically what that needs to look like in terms of a specific salary amount or kind of their proportionate amount of income that they draw from the business relative to the top line revenue stream. So again, that's a concept that very rarely does come up, but it's a discussion that can be had with your tax professional. So the first primary reason that someone's going to potentially consider opening a solo 401k is if they're looking to make larger contributions to a retirement account. So again, the IRAs are fantastic products, and certainly a lot of our clients utilize those well. They can grow tremendous wealth. But relative to a solo 401k, the IRA contribution limits are lower. So for individuals that are under 50 for the Roth and the traditional products, you can contribute up to $6,000 a year. If you're 50 years old plus, you can contribute up to $7,000 a year to the Roth and the traditional. Conversely, with a solo K, the max contribution for individuals under 50 is $61,000. For individuals 50 plus, it's $67,500. So as you can see, we're looking at roughly about a 10x type of contribution max with that solo 401k. So that is certainly a pretty useful tool for those that qualify. So as we dig a little bit deeper into how we get to that max contribution, the solo 401k actually has two elements to it. So if you think about the solo 401k as one big bucket, and inside that big bucket, there's two components. So there's kind of like there's a divider, if you will, in that bucket. So if you think about, maybe this is just me, but when I think of dividers, I think about popcorn. So sometimes around the holidays, you'll get that big bucket of popcorn. You'll have one section for the cheddar cheese. You'll have one section that's got some other different flavors of popcorn. So there's kind of these segments to that big tin can of popcorn. So it's kind of the same thing here. So one section, if you will, is the salary deferral or the employee deferral. And so with this, for individuals under 50, you can put up to $20,500. Individuals 50 plus, it's $27,000. And so this bucket is actually really interesting because this can either be pre-tax money, which is similar to a traditional IRA, or it can be post-tax money. So that's similar to a Roth IRA. So this bucket can either be pre or post-tax traditional or Roth monies. Now, the great thing about this is, let's say that you're kind of in early stages of your business. You want to put a ton of money into your retirement account, but the business isn't throwing off massive revenue streams yet. That's okay, because as long as you make $20,500 and you're under 50, you can actually contribute technically the $20,500. So obviously we all need living expenses, but if you're creating revenue streams through some other passive investments, whatever the case may be, and you don't need to pull a lot to live off of from this business, it could be a situation where your business owns or excuse me, earns 25,000 and you're lopping off 20,500 to put into the employee deferral. So in addition to this employee deferral, there's also a profit sharing component. Now, the percentage amount that you can put in will be dependent on the type of business structure you have. So as you can see on the screen, for sole proprietors, single member LLCs, it's going to be 20% of net revenue. For essentially anything else, you're looking at C Corps, S Corps, typically partnerships, you're going to be looking at 25%, many times a top line revenue to get to your contribution component. So the max there is going to be the 40,500. Now, this profit sharing bucket will always be pre-taxed, again, similar to a traditional IRA. So employee bucket could be pre or post. Profit sharing will always be pre-taxed. So again, that gets you to your max contribution of either 61K or 67,500. So in addition to a massive contribution limit, there's also the ability to borrow from this solo 401k. So for those of you that have been in corporate America or perhaps still are, you realize that many times with 401ks, you have the ability to borrow from that 401k. It's usually 50,000 or 50%, whichever is less. The same holds true with the solo 401k. So the example we use here is if you have a $30,000 solo 401k, you could personally borrow up to 15,000. So obviously, if you have a $400,000 solo 401k, then you'll be able to borrow up to 50,000. So the next concept is really only going to be applicable if you're looking to make a real estate investment. So if you're interested just purely in other asset classes, feel free to just kind of mentally check out here. This won't be relevant. But for those of you that are entrenched in the real estate investment world, the solo 401k can have a very useful tool associated with it. So whenever the retirement account is using leverage or borrowing money, so again, we spoke about the acquisition strategies. This is option 3, where a retirement account doesn't have all the capital to pay cash for an asset, so it's going to borrow money. So with a solo 401k, it is possible not to have a tax consequence even when the solo 401k is borrowing money. Typically, the caveat to that is that it's going to need to be at the initial time of acquisition and the initial debt that's being put on the property. So kind of a typical structure is your solo 401k is going to be buying, let's say, that $200,000 rental property. So let's just say it's a single family house, all in, purchase, closing costs, et cetera, just a nice, easy, clean 200K. And so out of that 200K, let's say that the solo 401k is going to put a $60,000 down payment and it's going to borrow $140,000. So that $140,000 is coming from some third party, either a hard money lender, a banking institution that does hard money loans. And so with that, if the loan is put on the property when the property is purchased and it's not refinanced later, so we kind of stick with this debt structure, you're going to be able to typically avoid the tax consequence, what's called UDFI, unrelated debt financed income. So that's certainly something we can have discussions with you if that is something that's applicable to your situation. And so with the solo 401k, there's essentially 2 ways that we can structure this account for you. Most typically what we see is that clients are doing a plan and record keeping concept. So that means that American IRA is going to, from a day-to-day standpoint, provide the same basic services that we provide to our IRA clients. So we're going to be assisting you in signing of documents for the purchase of assets, for the sale of assets, communicating with appropriate vendors. Again, if it's a real estate transaction, the closing attorneys or their paralegals. And so we're involved in the documentation, in the flow of monies for your account. Again, purchase, sale, cash flow of the assets, et cetera. So we're providing not only the 401k plan itself, but also the record keeping associated with it. So again, that's the most typical structure. We do technically also just simply provide a solo 401k plan. So really what this means is it's an upfront relationship where you fill out our documentation, we fill out the plan documents according to your specifications. And then ultimately with this, the onus will be on you and ideally your professionals, your tax and legal professionals to do record keeping for the inflow and outflow of monies and for the assets held by this solo 401k account. So we're just providing an upfront service of the plan. The monies will then be placed at a banking institution of your choice. And again, you'll ideally be leaning on especially your tax professionals to help you with kind of day-to-day books for this solo 401k product. So I would strongly encourage you only to consider this if you feel as though you're very knowledgeable about prohibited transactions, kind of the rules of the road, and you feel as though your strengths are that around organization and structure as it pertains to the record keeping. So now I want to delve into a situation that is really not uncommon for our client base. I say very frequently that we have a really sophisticated, really intelligent client base that creates wealth in a variety of ways. And so this is an example I've used because I do know this couple very well personally, and I was able to kind of see the trajectory, and it's always been kind of tattooed in my brain the way that they've been able to grow wealth. And so today is kind of a snapshot of just the first 5 years of this husband and wife couple that is in the real estate industry in a variety of capacities. They own rental properties, they build spec homes. And so this was kind of the 2013 to 2018 journey. Again, we have hundreds of clients that have very similar stories, but soft place in my heart for this family, again, because I do know them personally, and I kind of got to see every component of this journey. And so what we're going to see is a couple that started from scratch, just simply making their initial contributions, and they were able to create some pretty significant wealth in that 5-year period. And so after that 5-year period, they were each sitting on over 500,000 in value in their solo 401k. So as a family, the husband and wife combined, they had over $1 million after that 5-year concept. And so as they really broke down the journey, kind of their big takeaways, it really came down to 3 concepts for them. They were always maxing out their contributions. There were a couple of situations where they did utilize that tax efficient leverage strategy with their solo 401k. And since then, they've just been kind of keeping the money working, and we'll kind of unpack all that. And so when you think about it, just from a contribution standpoint, they were able to put over 250K into each of their solo 401ks, because again, you've seen that the contribution limits are in the $60,000 range now, 60 plus. 5 years ago, or excuse me, at the beginning of their journey, almost say 9 years ago, it was still 50,000 plus in terms of the annual contribution. So simple math, 5 years of 50,000 plus, you're looking at 250K before you make investments. So the first concept, which was the most creative component, if you will, was just simply the idea of using that non-recourse loan to build 2 spec houses. So again, they're in the business, so they understand this investment strategy well. Their solo 401ks hired a third-party general contractor to build these properties. And this did create significant chunks of capital. Both times were 6 figures plus in terms of the profits, the net profits associated with the deal. And as is always the case, but especially when you're talking about leverage, you're talking about possible tax consequences, they lean very heavily on their CPAs, their tax preparers, just to make sure that they were doing this thing correctly. And so since they've put those sizable contributions in, they've gotten some nice pops of profit from the new builds, they've gotten into, as they call it, kind of a lazy pattern of being a private lender for other real estate investors. So most typically what they do is they'll charge about 2 points and about 12% interest to these other investors so that they can do fix and flip deals, they can do spec houses, or perhaps they need some short-term capital to acquire a rental property that the investor will end up refinancing at some point in the future. So again, combined, after just 5 years, they have over $1 million in capital to deploy, because there are a lot of times where they'll actually partner their retirement accounts to make a loan, if need be, size-wise, to another investor. And so ultimately, the saying is partially true where you hear, it doesn't necessarily take money to make money, but it sure does make it a lot easier to make money when you have sizable sums of capital to deploy out there in different investment structures. So they've done incredibly well with that. And as is always the case, you want to make sure you're following the right procedures in order to make these investments. So before you go out there looking for opportunities, we do ask that you first open and fund your self-directed account. Then you go out there looking for investment options, whether it's being a private lender, whether it's buying rental properties. We're seeing a lot of private equity where there are new startup companies coming online. There's lots of interest in technology and different opportunities out there. So our clients are personally investigating those and finding the right fit. We're never weighing in as a self-directed provider. And then ultimately, we assist you with the paperwork and the flow of funds so that your retirement account can make that investment and own whatever asset that may be. And so if you stuck around this long, you're either a glutton for punishment or you're finding a little bit of value here. So if you're looking for additional content, whether it's purely on the self-directed end, or if you're just looking for kind of just some content that might be useful, just investment strategy wise, what have you, we do have a channel, The Lousy Investor, where, again, I speak on IRA topics and just investment topics overall. So please feel free to check that out. We really appreciate that. And if you're interested in having a conversation, feel free to call or email me. Again, I'm Sean McKay. So my email is Sean, SEAN, at AmericanIRA.com. Our office number is 828-257-4949. So again, kind of an interesting concept today with these solo 401ks. It's very similar to the IRAs in terms of the functionality, but again, a little bit more juice in terms of contributions, the ability to borrow from the account, et cetera. So hopefully there's some just spark of interest or just awareness moving forward about more options available to you in the self-directed world.